Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Extreme Heat and Community Resilience Program. This is the first community input session for round 2. I'd like to start by introducing our manager, Braden Kay, to give some opening remarks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Braden Kay, Extreme Heat and Community Resilience Program Manager. So happy to see so many of you here today. Um, the Governor's Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation is excited to be preparing for round 2 of the Extreme Heat and Community Resilience Grant Program. Um, I've been here since the early stages of our round 1, which we awarded last December, and those projects are just getting started. And we've had a long culture of really being in dialogue with local governments and tribes and community-based organizations across the state to help shape this program. So when we did round 1, we did regional listening sessions virtually across the state. We did statewide virtual sessions. We traveled across the state to talk to local governments and CBOs. We changed the program type, so we did large grants and small grants based on feedback that we got on listening sessions, just like the ones we're having today. We also made smaller grant amounts for the small grants because we heard from folks that a lot of communities weren't ready for large grants. So we really appreciate your participation today. Participation like this is what helped shape our round 1, and we're really looking forward to hearing from you what you think of our initial conception of round 2, and getting us feedback as we shape this and get ready to roll this out later this summer and into the early fall. So thank you so much for being here. Thanks for being part of this ongoing dialogue on how we all work together to address extreme heat needs across the state. And I'll pass it over to my Kelly and Colin to work through the program today.
Thank you, Braden. So this presentation is also available in Spanish for those who would like it. To get there, please go navigate to the bottom of your Zoom panel and click the icon shown here that says interpretation. That will bring up a menu, and then you can click Spanish to find the Spanish channel. I'm going to give a moment for the Spanish translators to communicate that, and then we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, thank you so much. We'll go on, move forward to the next slide. Today's agenda, we're going to cover some extreme heat background, go over our program and how it came to be and its goals. We're going to spotlight a couple of grantees from round 1. They just got into contract in May, and so they're beginning their projects. So that's a really exciting piece, and they help inspire some projects for round 2. So we're going to talk about and gather your feedback on the main components of our next round of funding. So that way we can know and align our program with community needs as best we can. Finally, we're going to end with about a 20-minute question and answer session. So feel free to put your questions in the question and answer section. We'll get to as many of those as we can. A couple housekeeping elements. We're going to be leaning on polls throughout this presentation quite a lot. And so please utilize those as a way to provide feedback. As I mentioned, we have a lengthy question and answer session at the end. So you use the Zoom feature to engage with that. And then we're also going to be looking at the likes on those questions. So please upvote questions that pop up in that feature. And that's how we're going to raise the most engaging questions to the top. So that way we make sure we speak to the the most important ones. Finally, at the end of the meeting, we're going to send out a survey that will allow you to provide more in-depth feedback on each of the poll questions that we asked, so that way you have an open-ended space to speak to those in more depth. So here's our Extreme Heat team. You heard from Kelly and Braden already. We'll hear more from them later on. My name's Colin Green. I'm an associate planner on the team, and I work on the grants program. We'll go on to the next slide and launch our first poll. So we'd love to gather some info about who you are and what your experience with the program is. Did you apply for round 1? And do you have a project in mind for round 2? We're going to let these polls go for about 30 seconds each, and then we'll share the results. Let's go ahead and share out these. How many responses have we gotten so far?
We have 101 responses, so I'll close the poll now.
Thanks, Catherine. Okay, very good feedback. A couple of you have started round 1. A couple people were funded, and the large majority didn't know about the round 1. So that's great that we have some new faces in the audience, so to speak, and that most of you have projects in mind for round 2. So that's really exciting. We'll go on to the next slide. So our grant program is part of a broader extreme heat action plan or extreme heat work that the governor's office is working on. The grants program is one element, and the other policy elements that Catherine works on primarily are updating California's extreme heat action plan in partnership with the California Natural Resources Agency, as well as Cal Heat Score, and that is a project in partnership with the Office of Environmental Health and Hazard Assessment. If you want more information on either of these programs, please reach out to Catherine. Her email is listed on the screen here, or sign up for our newsletter. There's a QR code at the end of the presentation to sign up for that. So our program was founded in 2021 and 2022 with some enabling legislation that recognized the threat of extreme heat to public health and how the climate crisis is worsening that threat. So that enabling legislation allowed us to put forward this grant program and fund planning and implementation projects that protect those who are most vulnerable to extreme heat. So round 1 of our funding funded projects up and down the state. We're in 46 different communities in 23 different counties, and it was a sum of $32 million in grant funding. We would like to highlight a couple of the implementation projects that were funded in round 1, and these highlight some of the key work that will help inspire round 2. So first, we have the Solar Chill project. It's a project based in Lake County. It was awarded $2.3 million, and it provides solar-powered air conditioning units for vulnerable households, and it's paired with a workforce development component to help grow the green economy throughout Lake County. Next, we have the Torres Martinez Desert Toya Indian Reservation. They were awarded $3.4 million for a solar power microgrid battery backup for a cooling center there. This cooling center is battery backup and the solar panels allow for the cooling center to stay cool even during power outages. And they also have some native planting that provides natural shade and promotes climate resiliency. Finally, in LA County, we have 3 parks that were awarded $3.9 million, provide cooling amenities such as shade structures, cool playground equipment, trees, hydration stations, as well as a social infrastructure piece that provides a lot of education on how to use these amenities during extreme heat events. If you want to review all the rest of our round 1 grantees, they're available on our website. And with that background, I'll pass it over to Kelly to dig into round 2 and get more input from y'all on how we shape this.
Thank you so much, Colin. I will try to pace myself to allow our interpreters do their job effectively, but I'm also cognizant that we only have 20 minutes for Q&As for what we are proposing for round 2, so I will try to strike a balance. So for the next slides, I will present to you what we are proposing in terms of what will shape round 2 components. So we will be very grateful for your feedback and also for your Qs and As. So I'll start with some basic information. Our funding available for this round number 2 is $22.5 million. Our funding sources are 2. The first one is the Greenhouse Reduction Fund, also known as the GGRF. And the second one is the California Proposition for Climate Fund that was passed just a few months ago. In terms of eligibility, if you participated in round 1, nothing much has changed. The same, and most organizations are still available to apply: community-based organizations, local and regional public entities, public academic institutions, a California Native American Trust. Next slide, please. All right, so we got a lot of feedback from our round 1 applicants that the 8 to 10 values we have operating in round 1 were a bit too much and too complex. So for this round 2, we have simplified the values that shape this program into 3, which you can see on the screen. The first one is harm reduction. We understand that this program isn't about extreme heat. It really is about protecting the health of Californians that can be put at risk because of extreme heat. And we know that in order to do that, we want collaborative partnerships to be the key of these solutions, putting communities' voices at the forefront of these solutions in partnership with those that have the power and the skills to make sure that these solutions are sustainable and perhaps scalable as well. And lastly, these projects that we envision for this program, we hope that they integrate both the social and physical infrastructure, because from the program's perspective, these are essential for lasting, effective responses to extreme heat in California. Next slide, please. So now it's time to provide your feedback. We want to know from you if these values align with your project idea, if you have one. We'll give you a few seconds to vote, and please keep in mind that at the end of this program, there is a survey with open-ended questions, so you will be able to provide feedback beyond of what you're doing right now. Catherine, please let us know when we are ready to launch the results. Yes, all right. Thank you so much for that. Those who are not sure, we will be particularly interested in hearing your feedback. We want to make sure that the values we set up for this program really do fit the needs that communities and people have in regards to extreme heat. So thank you so much for that. Next slide, please. All right, this is where I will probably take a little bit of time to explain what the difference is between round 1 and round 2. In round 1, we have 4 different project types. In this round, we'll have only 2. This round 2 will be more oriented for infrastructure, but we know that many communities are still in their early stages of extreme heat work, and therefore we have made an effort to make sure that we respond to both people who are in their planning stages and those who are ready to implement infrastructure. So the first type project is early infrastructure. Those are designed for applicants that still require planning as being the main component of their solution. So it will be oriented to planning. It's gotta have a planning focus. However, we also want these projects to develop in a way that they can become infrastructure in the future. So we are requiring that these early projects have a demonstration project component. And we will require partnerships as part of this. On the opposite side of the coin, we have the advanced infrastructure project type. This is for projects and applicants that are ready to implement their project in a way that it is green, gray, or a hybrid infrastructure designed to primarily provide cooling benefits. We are open to those projects having a planning component, but because this project should be focused on implementation, planning component should be a smaller part of that. And this project will also have to have a partnership component to that. And just to clarify, tribes are exempt from the partnership requirement. So now it's time for your feedback. After reviewing these projects, are you clear if you have an idea what project you'd like to apply for? What projects have you applied under? So we are going to launch the poll again, and please let us know if the way in which we presented the project types will be enough for you to know which project you will have to apply under. I will allow a few seconds to allow you to vote. And please let us know if you have further information to share with us through the Q&A or during the survey time at the end of the presentation. All right. For those that are not sure, which is 40%, that's a considerable proportion of you all, please let us know what is missing, what information you'd like to see there. We know that the guidelines are not there yet because we are in the feedback period of this, but we would love to know your perspective so we can write guidelines and shape the program in a way that is clear to you. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. All right, this is the bit where I will also take a little bit of time. Just as a reminder, we have 22.5 million available in funding, and we have 2 project types. Right now, what you're seeing on the screen are proposals of what we are presenting to you all, and we would love your feedback on this. For the early infrastructure type, we are proposing an amount between $500 to $600,000 in total. The demonstration project amount will have to be 25% of that. And because we are requiring partnerships, we are asking that the partners are allocated at least 15% of that budget. So I will take a few seconds to just let that sink in. Now, for our advanced infrastructure projects, we are proposing $1.8 million to $2.2 million. And because these are infrastructure implementation focused, there is obviously no required demonstration project. But for the partnerships, we are requiring at least 10% of that total budget be allocated to your partners. So I like to clarify here that the range is just a proposal. We heard in our round 1 from many of our applicants, both funded and unfunded, that the ranges for many of them was very helpful, that they could decide how much to ask from the program. And for some, that was difficult, that they prefer a fixed amount. So we want to bring this question to you all, and for that, we will be using polls again. So our question to you is, when applying for state grants, do you prefer to apply to a program with a funding range or a specific dollar amount? The answers could be a specific dollar amount. I can figure out how to use the money. Funding range, I prefer some flexibility. And the third one, I don't have a preference. So we'll give you a few seconds to consider this question. And please, if there is anything that we're missing here, let us know through the Q&A, or let us know also at the end of the program. Okay, that was very surprising. Funding range, I prefer some flexibility is the clear winner here. For those that prefer a specific dollar amount, let us know as well why that is the case. We are a bit surprised by this poll. We received a lot of feedback in round one on how our range was a little bit problematic, but we would like to hear a few more perspectives before we sit down to write the guidelines. But this is super helpful. Thank you so much. All right, this is another component that is always very controversial, no matter what grant program you're applying to, and we like to get this as right as possible. So as you can see, and if you were familiar with round number one, our application scoring has changed dramatically, at least what we are proposing to you today. So I will start by explaining the 40% work plan and budget. For those that are familiar, the work plan and the budget are a different component of the application, and that is where you really let us know in practice how is that you will implement your project and how much that will cost. Because that is part of the contract agreement and requires a lot of work, we are considering giving that 40% of the way when it comes to the scoring criteria. That will mean that questions around harm reduction, collaborative partnership, transformational projects, which are the values of this program, will only merit 15% of them each. This will be the narrative bits of the total application. And then the project vision and description, where you introduce your project to us, will also merit 15%. So again, I will take a few seconds before we launch the poll for you to be able to absorb that and put yourself in the situation in which you are writing the grant application and see if this scoring resonates with the work that you have to put on it, and if it suggests a fair scoring criteria. So again, we are proposing the 40% of the work plan and budget be weighted on that way. Questions around the values and your fitness of project to the program, it is 45%, 15% each. And then the last bit, project vision and description, be 15%. So with that being said, we'll do the poll to get your quick feedback. So when considering the weight of individual application components, would you rather that greater weight be given to the workbook or the narrative? So Catherine, I'm gonna ask you to also put the next slide on so our audience can see the application scoring again, and you can move your poll quizzes window around. So the options are the workbook should be given a greater weight than the narrative, or the narrative should be given a greater weight than the workbook, and I have no preference. Okay, so those of us that think the workbook should be given greater weight are 22% of 150 plus participants here. 44% think the narrative should be given a greater weight, which at the current moment is, and 34% have no preference. This is certainly super helpful for us. What would be more helpful, perhaps, is at the end, if you can give us a little bit more of what made you vote in that way. This is, if not one of the most important parts of the scoring process, assigning weight to each bit of the application. We always want to make sure that this is as easy as possible for applicants to write, but we also want to recognize all the work that goes once you're awarded, and that's certainly the work plan and the budget. So please let us know if you have any other thoughts on this matter. All right, technical assistance. As you know, technical assistance was provided during round 1 and will continue being provided during round 2. We are 4 people in this team, and we can provide technical assistance ourselves due to the capacity, but we are leaning on a third-party provider to make that possible. That third-party provider will support applicants from being able to meet grant requirements or guidance on their ability to do so, all the way to developing a competitive application. This will be requested through the pre-application form, and those who will be prioritized will be disadvantaged communities, tribes, or tribal entities. We also like to prioritize those regions not funded for implementation in round 1, and of course, applicants that have no consultant or grant writing support. Now, even when we engage a third-party provider, TA can still be scarce. So we like to have a little bit of your feedback in how we should organize our technical assistance efforts. So when you are writing the application, which components will you request technical assistance from? Apologies for the typo. Perhaps we can launch the poll, and I will read the question again. Which of the following application components will you request technical assistance for? Select up to 3 of the components below. The first one is the project vision and description. The second one is help answering questions around harm reduction. The third one is answering questions around transformational projects, work plan, or budget. Please select up to 3 options. All right. Thank you so much for that. We always have requests for support with work plan and budget. They are, in fact, the most complicated bits of any application process. However, I'm surprised to see transformational projects also being on the top. And this is definitely a reflection for us to see if we have conveyed what we mean by transformational projects. So that's how I'm interpreting this data. So thank you so much for that. Again, if we are interpreting it right, please say so in the Q&As. We'll have those 20 minutes to process a little bit more of your questions, but this is already super helpful. If you have any more feedback, please let us know. We have yet to write the guidelines for this program, so we're open to all sorts of feedback. Colin, over to you.
Thank you, Kelly. To align with our core values of collaborative partnerships, this is how we are going to frame our partnership requirement. And so if you're a community-based organization, we're going to require that you partner with a local or regional public entity, such as a city or county, and vice versa. So regional and local public entities must partner with CBOs. If you're an academic institution applying, we're going to need you to partner with both CBOs and local public entities. And then finally, California Native tribes do not have a partnership requirement. And we'd love to get your feedback, so we'll go to the next poll here. For this poll, what is the greatest barrier you face when considering the partnership requirements? The barriers that we've identified and love for your input on are staff time, capacity, resources, political environment, or you don't face barriers with partnerships. And again, in the survey, we'll ask for more feedback on these results as they come in. Wow. Okay, a really even spread across all of these. So this is a really important area where we'd like to get more detailed feedback in that open-ended question on the survey, because nothing is really jumping out here. You can go to the next slide, please. So I'm sure you're all wondering about the timeline for this program. When's your work going to be due, and what's that look like? So right now we're at the community input sessions. Thank you again for joining us on this first one. This fall, we're expecting to release the application, and then the application will be open through the fall and closing in the winter. The award amounts or announcements will be coming later the summer of 2026, and with the expectation that you can start your projects in that summer. So with that, we will move to our Q&A. So we've got more than our 20-minute allotted time, so that's great.
Thank you, Colin. For the Q&A, I will ask the support of our manager, Braden Kay, to join us in answering many of the questions that have been written out. Although I see that he's already been trying to answer to a few of them. Thank you, Braden. To make sure the interpretation is able to support us with this, even though you already have the questions on the screen, Colin and I will take turns asking Braden about the most voted questions, and Braden will take all of our questions and try to answer most of them. So I will begin with the first one. Braden, what does it mean to have a partnership?
Great question. So the idea with our partnerships, as we've just described them, is that if you're a local government, we're expecting you to have a community-based organization partnership to help make sure that the needs of your most vulnerable residents are centered in your infrastructure project. And so that, let's say, if you're doing an urban forestry master plan with a demonstration project, that you're really working with people as to where that demonstration project should be, how that project really relates to residents, how it supports creating more community buy-in for cooling and urban forestry. And so really we see a partnership driving that kind of voice of community, making sure that there's a sense of belonging around your project, making sure that there's a sense of collective action around your project. And then if you're a CBO applying, given that you're building infrastructure, you're likely going to need a local government to support that infrastructure process. So you may be doing a lot of that as a CBO. You may be doing a lot of that community listening and a lot of that movement building as part of the project. But in terms of the permitting and the physical building of infrastructure, which is very likely to be either on public property or subject to local regulation, that it's going to be really important to have a local government partner in doing that work. And so as we're thinking about how we're supporting, addressing extreme heat in communities across California, we really feel like these projects can't be done alone. And that's what we've been seeing and hearing as we've traveled across the state. And so with that in mind, we're really hoping to promote these types of partnerships to make sure that, one, the project can get done, and two, that the project builds into more than just a single project, but that can change the way that your local jurisdiction builds future projects, or can change the way your CBO approaches this type of problem solving and community engagement in the future. So we allowed for some amount of flexibility in how partnerships were built in our first round, and we did not have a partnership requirement for our small grants in our first round. And what we have found is that, especially when it comes to building infrastructure projects like we are going to be doing in round 2, that these partnerships were really necessary, and that projects that came to us with no partnerships are very immature partnerships, or unstructured partnerships, were a lot less likely to be successful. We're a lot less likely to be compelling. We're a lot less likely to have community support. So that's how we got to thinking that a partnership requirement for both project types was necessary for round 2.
Thanks, Braden. That's really helpful added context. Jade, among others, asks about transformational projects and that framing. Can you provide some examples of transformational projects that effectively address heat reduction?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and this is something I think Kelly just heard, acknowledge it before. We're early in our understanding of how to communicate about transformation. I think the idea is that there's a few types of ways that a project can be transformative. A project can happen, let's say you put in a cooling center with backup energy, as some of our projects in round 1 are doing. The idea is that as you're doing that project, you're getting ready to then say, oh, every time we build a community center, we're doing solar and backup power, and we're putting that into city policy. That's a way of doing transformation. You build the project, but the project also leads to lasting policy. So policy transformation is one kind of transformation. You could then have programmatic transformation. So let's say you put in a park retrofit like LA County is doing, and you do all of these parks retrofits. And as Callan explained, LA County now has this social infrastructure component where they're training people how to use their parks and heat waves. Well, maybe after this project, they then adopt having that program be a permanent program. So now they have a permanent Camping 101 heat resilience training in their parks program that started with the initial funding. So that's programmatic transformation. Then infrastructure transformation is where you build a single infrastructure project, and then that gets you excited to build more of them. So let's say you do a streets retrofit project where you do green stormwater infrastructure and urban forestry to create a cool corridor in one of your major thoroughfares in your jurisdiction, and then we pay for that. You get funded by round 2. But then you create a whole plan to do cool corridors across all of your city, and you have an infrastructure pipeline of 5 more projects you're going to do based on the one we funded. And so that's infrastructure transformation. So I think some people were like, well, what if we just want to build a thing? That's fine, and it's important to build solutions, but we want these solutions to have some type of forward-thinking component. It does not have to be, oh, we promise to build 5 more of these. It could be a programmatic transformation, it could be policy transformation, or it could be infrastructure transformation.
Thank you, Braden. Just a small nudge to Colin and Braden to pace ourselves to allow interpretation to flow more effectively. And while I give us a couple of seconds to rest our voices, I like to highlight one comment here from Greg Ira. It says, the kind of project we envision is not a one-time standalone solution, but it's also not necessarily transformative, but it is impactful. The transformational in my mind means changes the way that we do business. It doesn't necessarily mean it is any more effective, but it probably should. It is similar to innovative in a way. Innovation is great, but only if it is effective. There are lots of effective projects that are neither innovative or transformational, but help move the needle on key metrics and do so at a scale. Thank you so much, Greg. I know it's not a question, but it's a very important comment. And please know that we are reading and that we have received similar feedback on these and other programs, and we couldn't agree more. Any quick reactions to that, Braden?
Nope, I think that's good.
All right. I will move us to a very peculiar question that I hadn't considered before, but I would love to elevate. If we have multiple partnerships that broaden the reach of the project proposal, with the majority of the amount of going to partners, could this justify a larger grant amount beyond that 2.2 million?
Yeah, so, when we define our project sizes, we have to define them in the scope of work ahead of time. And so when we did round one, we did allow for more money to go towards projects because the upper limit was $4 million. In this case, because of the funding sources that we have, there's a real impetus to making sure that a lot of money is used for the actual physical infrastructure. So while we acknowledge we do have some projects that we funded in round one that have a large amount of money going to different partners and then money going to infrastructure, with this round, we really have to make sure that a large amount is going towards infrastructure. So we're not seeing the potential to have a limit above $2.2 million. So in fact, it may even be a little bit lower than $2.2 million.
De hecho, a lo mejor va a ser menor de 2 millones de dólares.
Thank you, Braden. I'm hearing a little bit of crossover on the channels, but I think we are good now. Colin, can you confirm that you are only able to listen to me?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, over to you then.
I think this is a really important question. Can we define what a demonstration project is?
Yeah, so in this case, we are looking for physical infrastructure projects. So, those could be home retrofits, park retrofits, streets retrofits, but physical infrastructure projects.
Los proyectos de estructura física.
And then in terms of what we mean by demonstration, the idea here is that if you're doing a project, let's say on urban shade, or you're doing a project based on community resilience centers that can be used as cooling centers, that the demonstration project supports the work that you're doing, the kind of movement building you're trying to do in your area. And so we're not looking for a project that's unrelated to the work you're doing. We're looking for a project that demonstrates the planning and engagement work that you're engaged in. So for instance, we're like a fire resilience demonstration project for an urban heating for an extreme heat planning process would not be appropriate. Now, if you somehow did a demonstration project that was doing urban shade within a fire resilient context, that could be an appropriate demonstration project, but it really needs to be a demonstration project that is demonstrating the values and the trajectory of the extreme heat work that you're doing.
Thank you, Braden. I am scanning very quickly for the questions that are receiving the most votes. Please keep doing that. It's a really good sign for us that those questions need to be addressed in real time. So please help us with that. Another question that is showing up here is, could your team help to match CVOs and local governments? Sometimes the hardest part is figuring out who works in this space, and if your team helped to facilitate matches, that would be great resources of technical assistance.
So you can certainly reach out to us and let us know what your needs are and where you are. And we cannot be official matchmakers, but our TA provider is aware of different people that are working in the area, and they're able to make some linkages. We also have a strong partnership with the Office of Community Partnerships and Strategic Communications that's very aware of CBOs that are in areas across the state. So there are people that can help you think about what your partnerships can look like, both other state agencies as well as RTA providers, but we won't be able to directly match you in terms of what our program staff can do.
Thank you, Braden. The next question that has the most upvotes is, how will harm reduction be characterized and quantified? Assumptions, metrics, timeframes, etc. A standard risk assessment framework would be helpful to compare proposals, uncertainties, ranges.
Yeah, I really appreciate that comment. I think right now we were planning as a team to have harm reduction be defined by the project. Last time we were very prescriptive of, like, we want you to go to CalAdapt and tell us the heat data for your region and how heat vulnerable you are. We didn't find that to be very instructive and very helpful for reviewers in the first round. What we found so helpful in the first round were applicants that were able to tell stories of who was not thriving in their jurisdiction and how this solution supported the people that were most harmed by extreme heat. And so that's why we really came to this harm reduction section, and we're working on sort of a series of questions that gets to who's being harmed and how do you know they're being harmed, but not having that be standardized, because we want communities to be able to communicate about their specific needs and their specific harms in the way that feels most comfortable to them.
I have another question here. It comes from Ella. Can you apply for planning and infrastructure at the same time? Or does design need to be complete to apply for infrastructure? What percentage design is recommended? A lot of questions there, but can we start by answering if they can apply for planning and infrastructure at the same time? Thank you, Ella.
So the early transformative infrastructure projects would allow for you to do infrastructure and planning together. That's how we design the early projects to do that. And you could certainly build in some design activities into that. I think for the advanced infrastructure projects, we're really hoping to have designed, projects that are conceived and ready to be put into the ground within the 30-month period. So if you need to have some design activities at the beginning of the grant to finalize a design for your streets retrofit, your home retrofits, your parks retrofits, your community center retrofits, like, you can have some amount of design into the project, but we're really not expecting you starting that project from zero design, because it's a 30-month project. It needs to be completed within 30 months. So we're expecting to see projects that, for the advanced, we're expecting to see projects that have already been conceptualized.
Next question here should be fairly straightforward for you, Braden. Is there a local match requirement? If so, what percentage?
We don't have we did not have a match requirement in round one, and we are currently not expecting to do a match requirement in round two.
Thank you so much. Just flagging that we have 10 minutes left for Q&A, and we'll certainly do our best to answer to all questions. Just a quick request to keep voting for questions that you really think we should answer live. That will be extremely helpful for us. This is a comment. I believe we already addressed the question, but it's gotten 3 votes. Can you provide more details about infrastructure focus? And that comes from Sagar, and there is also a comment on it. Physical infrastructure is certainly needed to minimize the impacts of extreme heat. However, data or computational infrastructure is also needed to provide realistic forecasts of heat events at different time scales. So in this sense, are data / computational infrastructure considered as infrastructure under the project scope, or they must be physical infrastructures like cooling centers or buildings or civil engineering structures? Well, that was long, but thank you so much, Zahar, for elaborating on that. That is very helpful. Go ahead, Brayden.
Yeah, no, and it's great feedback. And, we designed round one to really allow for any type of activity around extreme heat that a community or organization or tribe could come up with. And this time around, because of our funding sources, they're very infrastructure-oriented funding sources. So certainly, I hope as the leader of this program at some point that we get other funding sources that are less restrictive and allow us to fund more planning activities, more response activities, more social infrastructure activities, more data-centered activities. We had that opportunity in round one. That's not an opportunity that we have as much access to in round two. Now, we did try to build these infrastructure projects to allow for planning activities, community engagement activities, belonging activities, a lot of different potentially data activities to be involved in them, but they have to at the heart be infrastructure projects, especially for the advanced projects because of our funding sources. But the point is very, very well taken.
We've got a question here regarding how the partnership requirements will work for municipalities. Most capital projects that affect communities are going to be undertaken by government resources that we don't typically pay for CBOs to do that. CBOs may be involved in community engagement, but they don't have another role where we would pay them. Please provide an example of how LA County did that. And then Megan expands on this question with a concern about the 10% allocation, saying, I'm unsure how our agency would allocate 10% of the grant towards a partnership requirement, but examples would be appreciated.
Yeah, so one thing we talked a lot about in round one, and that we're certainly wanting to make sure we talk a lot about during this round, is all of the opportunities for community engagement, communications, artist engagement that can go into projects. And so let's say you're retrofitting a park, you can do community engagement at the very beginning to help with park design. You can do community engagement as the park is being built, and then you can do community engagement to celebrate the park and make sure people use it during heat events and in different ways. And so there's opportunity for engagement before, during, and after an infrastructure project, and you certainly can spend 10% of your project on different types of engagement. Not only can you engage community, you can engage social workers to make sure it's a trauma-informed design of your infrastructure. You can engage artists to make sure that there's local references in your infrastructure to the city or jurisdiction that you're in. Maybe an artist comes in and does poetry about different the history of different different communities that live in that area. Maybe an artist comes in and does a mosaic that talks about the history of that place. There's so many ways to make sure we want this infrastructure not just to cool people, but to be used and to be celebrated and to be an integral in the fabric of your community. And so in my mind, 10% is nowhere close to enough to make sure that infrastructure is really of that community. And so I do think that there's a lot of ways to do that. The LA County example is having a CBO do the resident engagement around how to use their parks in case of emergencies. This Camping 101 project that they're doing. They also are using that CBO to do listening sessions around what amenities should be in the park. So there's a lot of opportunity to use that 10% or more than 10% to do that listening and engagement and sort of people-centered design of your infrastructure projects.
Thank you, Braden. We have 5 minutes left, so we will answer 2 more questions. I will do the first one, and Colin, you can work on selecting the last one. I will try to paraphrase this question to make it more applicable for everyone. Ashley Jackson from Inland Empire is asking us if the program will, in what ways the program will ensure grant criteria and outreach strategies designed to reach and prioritize high needs communities that might have fewer resources and staffing to navigate complex application processes.
Yeah, so we don't have, in our enabling legislation, we're not allowed to do regional prioritization. There are some grants that do allow for that. But with us, we definitely talk to our reviewers about how to identify where the needs are the most and think about, you know, where we need the heat resilient infrastructure and looking into the applications as to what kind of argument they're making as to why they need this infrastructure. So we funded at least 4 projects in the Inland Empire as an example in round 1. There are areas of California that we didn't get to fund in this last round that we would love to fund moving forward. We don't have an official requirement around having to fund in certain regions, but we're definitely looking for communities to make that, you know, argument as to why they're being harmed by extreme heat and why they need support with this type of infrastructure. And we're very well aware of areas like the Inland Empire and the Inland Desert and the Central Valley that really need increased investment in extreme heat and don't necessarily have other routes of investments.
Thank you so much, Braden. I am being advised that our last question will probably run us over, so we are going to end the Q&A here. Catherine, if you could please pull the last slide for us to see. Please subscribe to our newsletter. Once the NOFA is out, we'll communicate about these releases through our newsletter primarily, but also stay connected with LCI. That is how we also communicate our progress on building round 2 of this program. And lastly, please know that as a state government, we're obliged to process each one of your feedback pieces. So at the end of this program, there will be a survey with open-ended questions where you can further provide us with your feedback, and we would appreciate that a lot. Thank you, Braden, Colin, and our interpreters behind the curtains, as well as Catherine Foster for her technical support. Thank you so much. Have a great day.